at CB.
Thank you,
President.
President. Do you plan to ask President
Low
Bukele
rating.
to help return the man who your administration says was mistakenly
Which one is that?
deported? The man who was mistakenly deported to El Salvador?
Well, let me ask Pam, would you answer that question?
Sure, President. First and foremost, he was illegally in our country. He had been illegally in our country. And in 2019, two courts, an immigration court and an appellate immigration court, ruled that he was a member of MS-13 and he was illegally in our country. Right now, it was additional paperwork had needed to be done. That's up to El Salvador if they want to return him. That's not up to us. The Supreme Court ruled, President, that if, as El Salvador wants to return him, this is international matters, foreign affairs, if they wanted to return him, we would facilitate it, meaning provide a plane.
Today we're diving into a fiery political moment making headlines. Attorney General Pam Bondi is defending the deportation of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, an alleged MS-13 member, and the Supreme Court is backing her up. This story involves illegal immigration, violent gangs, courtroom drama, and international diplomacy. So yeah, it's a lot. But I'm breaking it all down clearly and without the spin. Make sure to stick around until the end because what the Supreme Court ruled may surprise you and it could change how deportation battles are handled from now on. Let's get into it. Kilmar Abrego Garcia.
You are doing a great job.
Thank you.
Wait a minute. Can you just also respond to that question? Because, you know, it's asked by CNN and they always ask it with a slant because they're totally slanting because they don't know what's happening. That's why nobody's watching them. But would you answer that question also, please?
Yes, gladly. So, as Pam mentioned, there's an illegal alien from El Salvador. So, with respect to you, he's a citizen of El Salvador. So, it's very arrogant even for American media to suggest that we would even tell El Salvador how to handle their own citizens as a starting point. As two immigration courts found that he was a member of MS-13. When President Trump declared MS-13 to be a foreign terrorist organization, that meant that he was no longer eligible under federal law, which I'm sure you know, you're very familiar with the INA, that he was no longer eligible for any form of immigration relief in the United States. So he had a deportation order that was valid, which meant that under our law, he's not even allowed to be present in the United States and had to be returned because of the foreign terrorist designation. This issue was then, by a district court judge, completely inverted, and a district court judge tried to tell the administration that they had to kidnap a citizen of El Salvador and fly him back here. That issue was raised to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said the district court order was unlawful.
Kilmar Abrego Garcia, not a household name until now, is a citizen of El Salvador and, according to two U.S. immigration courts, a known member of the violent MS-13 gang. He entered the U.S. illegally and was ordered deported back in 2019. That's not just one court, that's both an immigration court and an appellate immigration court confirming his gang affiliation and immigration status. This wasn't some clerical error. This was a full legal process that ended with a lawful deportation order. Pam Bondi stepped in front of the cameras to set the record straight. She reminded the media and the public that this man was in the country illegally and tied to MS-13, one of the most brutal gangs in the world. Her message? He didn't belong here. He was lawfully deported. And now, the media is trying to turn this into a mistake? That's not how this works. She also pointed out that if El Salvador wants to send him back to the U.S., that's entirely up to them, not us. This is an international issue, not just a domestic one. Here's where it gets wild. A district court judge actually tried to force the U.S. government to bring Garcia back from El Salvador, like physically go get him and bring him back here. Yeah, you heard that right. But the Supreme Court unanimously 9-0 reversed that decision. They ruled that no judge can force the president. That's just not how our system works. Bondi called the decision a huge win, not just for her team, but for legal common sense. At one point, the conversation turned toward the media, particularly CNN, and how they've been framing this story. Bondi and others accused them of spinning the situation to make it look like the U.S. had wrongfully deported an innocent man. But here's the deal. Two courts ruled this guy was part of MS-13. He had a deportation order. There was no legal basis for him to stay in the country. Critics say this is
and its main components were reversed 9-0 unanimously, stating clearly that neither Secretary of State nor the President could be compelled by anybody to forcibly retrieve a citizen of El Salvador from El Salvador who again is a member of MS-13, which, as I'm sure you understand, rapes little girls, murders women, murders children, is engaged in the most barbaric activities in the world, and I can promise you, if he was your neighbor, you would move right away.
So you don't plan
But
to
the
ask for
Supreme
anything
Court's
to get
asking
it back?
to,
And
that-
what was the ruling
that-
in the Supreme Court, Steve? Was it 9-0?
Yes, it was a 9-0
In our favor.
in our favor against the district court ruling, saying that no district court has the power to compel the foreign policy function of the United States. As Pam said, the ruling solely stated that if this individual, at El Salvador's sole discretion, was sent back to our country, that we could deport him a second time.
Well, I-
No version of this legally ends up with him ever living here because he is a citizen of El Salvador. That is the president of El Salvador. Your questions about it, per the court, can only be directed to him.
Critics say this is a perfect example of how the media can warp a narrative, and that's why stories like this need to be talked about more openly. If you're finding this breakdown helpful and want more no-spin coverage on politics, law, and current events, go ahead and click that subscribe button and turn on the bell so you don't miss future videos. Let's grow this community of critical thinkers. We need that now more than ever. So here's the bottom line. Kilmar Abrego Garcia was deported under legal grounds. Pam Bondi is standing firm on that decision, and the Supreme Court just delivered a major ruling that could reshape how far U.S. courts can go in international immigration cases. This isn't just about one man, it's about law, sovereignty, and what role the U.S. plays in global law enforcement. Let me know what you think in the comments. Was the Supreme Court right? Should he have been deported? And how should we handle future cases like this? Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.